The courtroom smelled like old wood and cold air. I remember that detail because I was focusing on it. The smell, the draft coming from somewhere near the ceiling. Because if I focused on that, I did not have to focus on the judge's face. And I did not have to focus on Derek, sitting at the other table in his navy Brioni suit, calm and composed, like a man who already knew how this was going to end. Because he did. My name is Serena Caldwell. I am 33 years old. I used to be a designer. I used to have a company, a home on the Upper West Side, and a daughter named Lily, who smelled like lavender shampoo and always wanted to hold my hand even in parking lots. Long after most kids her age had stopped doing that. On a Tuesday morning in November, a judge in Manhattan Family Court looked down at a stack of documents and told me I was unfit to be her primary parent. Unstable. That was the word in the report. Emotionally and financially unstable. I sat very still when he said it. I had been coached to sit still. My lawyer, the only one I could still afford after Derek's legal team had spent 8 months methodically dismantling everything I owned, had told me, do not react. Whatever they say, do not react. So I did not react when the judge cited the audio recordings. I did not react when he referenced the incident at Lily's school. I did not react when he noted in a flat judicial voice the unexplained deposits in my bank account. I just sat there and watched them take my daughter. Derek did not look at me when the ruling was read. Vivian, my best friend of 11 years, the woman who had stood beside me at my wedding, who had held my hand in the hospital the night Lily was born. She looked at the floor. Neither of them looked at me. Outside, it was snowing. The first real snow of the season, thick and quiet, covering the courthouse steps in white. I stood at the top of those steps, and I could not move. A woman in a gray coat walked past me with a coffee from a cart on the corner. The city kept going. Lily was in a black car somewhere already heading uptown, and I was standing in the snow, holding a leather folder with papers that had just told me I was nobody. I did not know then what I know now. I did not know that the audio recordings had been edited. I did not know about the bank deposits that Derek's own attorneys had arranged. I did not know that every single piece of evidence used against me had been carefully built, brick, by 2 people I had trusted completely. I did not know any of that yet. But 8 months later, on a Friday afternoon in December, a man I had never met knocked on the door of my tiny apartment in Astoria, Queens, and set a manila folder on my kitchen table. And everything I thought I knew about the worst day of my life began to look completely different. The apartment on 34th Avenue was the kind of place you moved into temporarily and somehow never left. 1 bedroom, a kitchen window that faced directly into a brick wall, a radiator that clicked all night like it was counting something. I had been there 8 months, and the walls still had the previous tenant's nail holes because I kept telling myself I was not staying long enough to fill them. That was a lie I told myself every morning. I woke up at 5:47 most days. Not because of an alarm, because that was the time Lily used to crawl into bed with me back when we lived on the Upper West Side. Small feet on the hardwood, the door creaking open, then the warm weight of a 7-year-old deciding my side of the pillow was better than her own. She had not done that in 8 months. I had a routine now. Coffee from the corner diner. $2, paper cup, the same counterman who never asked how I was doing, which I appreciated more than I could explain. Then back upstairs to my old MacBook Pro, where I took whatever freelance design work I could find. Corporate logos, social media templates. Once, a birthday invitation for a woman in Ohio I would never meet. It was not the life I had built, but it was the life I had left. I was allowed to see Lily on alternate Saturdays, supervised visits 2 hours at a family center in Midtown that smelled like carpet cleaner and stale coffee. Derek's assistant dropped her off and picked her up. Derek himself never appeared. He did not need to. He had already won. On the first Saturday of every month, Lily pressed her small hand flat against the glass door as she left. A wave, and something else. Something that looked like an apology she was too young to say out loud. I pressed my hand against the other side every single time. What I did not know was that in those same 8 months, someone had been watching Derek Ashton very carefully, and that person was about to knock on my door with evidence that would make those supervised visits the last humiliation I would ever accept. It arrived on a Thursday. A cream envelope, thick and heavy, the kind that costs more per sheet than most people spend on lunch. My name was written in a calligrapher's hand, Serena Caldwell, in ink so dark it was almost black. There was no return address. There did not need to be. I recognized Vivian's handwriting on the back seal. I stood at my mailbox for a long time before I opened it. Inside was a single card. Ivory cardstock, gold border, simple, elegant. The kind of invitation that whispered money without having to say it. Derek James Ashton and Vivian Claire Rhodes request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration. Saturday, the 14th of December, the St. Regis, New York. I read it twice. Then I sat down on the bottom stair of the lobby, still in my coat, and read it a third time. 11 years. Vivian and I had been friends for 11 years. We met sophomore year at NYU. 2 girls from different worlds assigned to the same studio project, staying up until 3 a.m. arguing about color theory and laughing too loud. She was maid of honor at my wedding. She was in the delivery room the night Lily was born. She sat with me in a CVS parking lot at midnight while I cried over a positive pregnancy test and told me everything was going to be okay. She told me it was going to be okay. And now her name was printed next to his on a card that cost more than my weekly groceries. I thought about what Lily had said the last Saturday I saw her. She had looked up at me with those careful eyes and said, in a voice too small for a 7-year-old, "Daddy says Aunt Viv is going to be my new mom." I had kept my face very still. I had smiled. But sitting on that cold lobby stair, holding that ivory card, something shifted in my chest. Not grief, not shame. Something harder, something I had not felt in 8 months. And for the first time since November, I did not press my hand against glass. I made a fist. He knocked on a Friday afternoon. I almost did not answer. I was in the middle of a logo revision for a client in Phoenix, still in yesterday's sweater, a half-empty cup of cold coffee on the desk beside my MacBook. When strangers knocked in this building, it was usually a package for the wrong unit, or someone buzzing the wrong floor. I opened the door with the chain still on. He was tall. Early 40s, maybe. Dark coat, no tie. He had the kind of face that looked like it had spent a lot of time paying close attention to things. Not handsome exactly, but present in a way that made you feel observed. He was holding a manila folder against his side, like he had been holding it for a long time. "My name is Julian Mercer," he said. "I write for The Atlantic. I have been investigating Ashton Ventures for 14 months. He paused. "I think you have something I need, and I think I have something you need a lot more." I did not let him in right away. I stood at the door with the chain still on and looked at him for a long moment. In the 8 months since the ruling, 3 different people had approached me claiming they wanted to help. 2 of them were trying to sell me something. One turned out to be a private investigator Derek had hired to document who I was meeting with. I had learned not to trust open doors. But something about the way Julian Mercer stood in the hallway, no urgency, no performance, just quietly waiting like a man who understood he was asking for something that cost more than he could see, made me reach for the chain. I took it off. He came in and set the manila folder on my kitchen table without a word. Then he looked at me and said very carefully, "Before I show you this, I need you to understand that what is inside is going to change the way you see everything that happened to you." I pulled out a chair and sat down. He opened the folder, and the first page I saw was not a financial report, not a legal document. It was a photograph of Vivian and Derek, laughing together at a restaurant on the Upper East Side. The timestamp in the corner read 18 months ago. 4 months before Derek filed for divorce. 6 months before Vivian became my shoulder to cry on. I stared at that photograph for a long time. Vivian was laughing. Head tilted back, one hand on the table, the way she laughed when something genuinely caught her off guard. Derek had his arm resting along the back of her chair, not touching her, but close. The kind of close that takes months to build. 18 months ago. I had been married to Derek 18 months ago. I had been sleeping beside him, making dinner, scheduling Lily's school pickups, believing completely, well, without question, that what was broken between us was just the ordinary wear of a long marriage. Something we could fix if we both tried. Julian did not rush me. He sat across my kitchen table with his hands folded and let me look. There were more photographs. 12 in total. 3 different restaurants. One in the West Village, one near Lincoln Center, one I recognized as a rooftop bar in Tribeca. In one photograph, Vivian was reading something on her phone, and Derek was watching her with an expression I had not seen on his face in years. Then Julian slid a second page across the table. It was a financial record. A wire transfer, $890,000. Sent from a subsidiary of Ashton Ventures to a holding company called VCR Consulting LLC. Dated 11 months ago. 1 month before the custody hearing. Julian tapped the page. VCR Consulting, he said quietly. Vivian Claire Rhodes. She registered that LLC 14 months ago, 3 weeks after Derek first contacted her directly. The payment cleared 4 days before your trial began. I looked up at him. She was paid, I said. He nodded. Not just paid. She was the architect. The audio recordings, the school incident report, the bank deposits Derek planted in your account. Julian paused. Vivian gave him everything he needed to build that case. She knew your therapy schedule, your worst days, your weakest moments. She handed them to his legal team like a blueprint. The room was very quiet. I thought about the CVS parking lot, her hand on my back, her voice saying it was going to be okay. I thought about Lily pressing her hand against the glass, and I realized my daughter had not just been taken from me. She had been taken on purpose, with a plan, by the 2 people I had trusted most. And somewhere inside that plan was a reason they needed Lily badly enough to destroy me for it. Julian left the folder on my table. He said he would come back the next morning. He said I needed time to sit with it, that most people, when they see something this big, either move too fast or shut down completely, and neither one helps. He said it like someone who had watched both happen before. After he left, I did not move for a long time. I sat at my kitchen table while the light changed outside the window, the gray afternoon going darker, the streetlights below clicking on one by one, and I read through every page in that folder. Twice, the photographs, the wire transfers, a timeline Julian had built by hand, month by month, showing exactly how the plan had been constructed. It was meticulous. That was the word that kept coming to me. Meticulous. Derek had not just betrayed me, he had engineered it. Every stumble I took in that courtroom had been prepared in advance. Every piece of evidence that made me look unstable, unreliable, unfit, it had been assembled by someone who knew me well enough to know exactly which stones to place in my path. Vivian had known me for 11 years. She knew which nights I could not sleep. She knew what I looked like at my lowest. She had been there for all of it, and she had taken notes. I got up and made coffee I did not drink. I stood at the window and looked at the brick wall across the alley, and I thought about two things at the same time. The first was Lily. Always Lily, the lavender shampoo, the small hand against the glass. The second was what Julian had said before he left, quietly, almost like a warning. There is a hard way to do this and a right way. The hard way feels better in the short term. The right way takes longer. But the right way is the only one that gets Lily home. I turned that sentence over in my mind all night. By the time the sun came up over Astoria, I had made my choice. I picked up my phone and called Julian. When he answered, I said only 4 words. I found the files. And the silence on his end of the line told me those 4 words had just changed everything. While I was sitting in that cold apartment in Astoria, reading a folder that held my life apart, Derek Ashton was 40 blocks north, having dinner at Per Se. Window table, bottle of Barolo, the Vivian across from him in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They were reviewing the seating chart for the St. Regis reception. Derek had his Mont Blanc pen out, making small, precise marks on the printed layout the way he made marks on everything. Quietly, deliberately, like a man who understood that the details were where power actually lived. Vivian pointed to a name near table 7 and said, "Move the Nakamura group closer to us." Derek nodded without looking up. "They are the lead on the Series D," he said. "They should be close enough to watch, but not close enough to talk too much." That was the thing about Derek that most people never understood until it was too late. He did not separate his personal life from his business strategy. They were the same thing. The wedding was not a celebration. It was a presentation. Vivian was not a woman he loved. She was the final piece of an image he had been building for 3 years. The stable family, the polished partner, the domestic life that reassured cautious investors that Derek Ashton was the kind of man who built things that lasted. Lily was part of that image too. A daughter from a previous marriage. Evidence of character. Evidence of roots. His attorney had coached him on exactly how to present her during the custody hearing. Not as a child he wanted, but as a child who needed stability. Who needed a father with the resources to provide what a struggling, emotionally fragile mother simply could not. Vivian had written parts of that argument herself. She knew which words would land. Across the table, she lifted her wine glass and smiled at him. Derek smiled back. It was the smile of 2 people who had gotten exactly what they wanted and were not yet aware of what it had cost them. What neither of them knew, sitting at that window table with the Manhattan skyline behind them and the Barolo between them, was that 40 blocks south, a woman they had both underestimated was opening a hard drive that contained every secret they had ever tried to bury. Julian came back the next morning at 8. He brought coffee. 2 cups from the cart on my corner, black, no sugar, and set them on the table the same way he had set the folder the day before. Like a man who understood that some conversations needed something warm to hold on to. I had not slept. I had spent the night at my desk with the old hard drive plugged into my MacBook, going through every folder I had archived from my years at Soho Creative Partners. Design files, brand guidelines, internal decks. Things I had built for Ashton Ventures in the early years when the company was still small enough that Derek handled everything himself, and I was the person who made it look legitimate. And buried inside a folder I had not opened in 4 years, I found it. Original brand identity files, layered source documents, and embedded in the metadata of 3 separate files. Internal memos Derek had used as reference text when briefing me on the company vision. Memos that described, in plain language, a valuation structure that bore almost no resemblance to the figures Ashton Ventures had presented to investors. I showed Julian. He read for a long time without speaking. Then he looked up and said, "This is the piece I have been missing for 14 months. We sat at that small kitchen table for 3 hours. Julian had a legal pad. I had my laptop. We built it together. The sequence, the timing, the question of how and when and where. He pushed back on every shortcut. When I said I wanted to confront Derek directly, Julian shook his head. "That feels good for 10 minutes, he said. Then it hands him a narrative. You become the unstable ex-wife who showed up and made a scene. We have seen that story before." I knew he was right. I did not like it, but I knew. So we kept working. 2 people at a kitchen table in Astoria, Queens, building something careful and quiet and airtight. The way you build anything that has to hold weight. It was almost noon when Julian set down his pen and said, "There is one more thing we need before this is enough. Something only you can get. And to get it, you are going to have to do the one thing I know you do not want to do. You are going to have to walk into that wedding." 3 nights before the wedding, my phone rang at 11. The apartment was dark, except for the lamp beside my MacBook. I had been staring at the same page of Julian's notes for 20 minutes without reading a single word. The screen lit up. Unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail. Then something made me answer. "Mom." 1 word. Small and careful, like she was testing whether the line was safe. "Lily." I sat up straight. "Baby, where are you calling from?" I found Grandma Carol's old phone in the guest room drawer. Her voice dropped. "Daddy doesn't know I have it. I'm not supposed to call you except on Saturdays." I kept my voice steady, the way you keep a candle flame steady when there is wind in the room. "I'm so glad you did," I said. A long quiet followed. The kind that means a child is working up to something. "Mom. Vivian told me today that after the wedding, you won't come to the Saturday visits anymore. She said it would be too confusing. She said you agreed." The room went very still. "I did not agree to that," I said. "I would never agree to that. Not ever." Then, in a voice so small I had to press the phone hard against my ear, "I didn't think so, but I didn't know for sure." I closed my eyes for a moment. "Lily," I said, "I need you to listen carefully. I am coming. I don't want you to worry. I don't want you to do anything. I just need you to know that I am coming." A pause. Then, "Okay, Mom. I believe you." We stayed on the line for another minute without saying much. Just breathing. Just present. After she hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. Then I opened my laptop, pulled up the document Julian and I had been building, and began working with a steadiness I had not felt since the morning a judge told me I was unfit, because Lily still believed me. And those 3 words were the only thing I needed to make sure I did not fail her again. We parked on 55th Street at 6:47 p.m. The St. Regis rose above us in pale stone and gold light, the kind of building that made everything around it look temporary. Doormen in white gloves, a red carpet running from the entrance to the curb. Black cars pulling up one after another, war-releasing people in evening gowns and dark suits who moved like they had always belonged in places like this. Julian turned off the engine. Neither of us spoke for a moment. He had the USB drive in his inside coat pocket. I had a copy on mine. We had spent the previous 48 hours verifying every document a final time. Julian, with his contact at the SEC, me with a forensic accountant Julian trusted, who had reviewed the metadata files and confirmed in writing what they proved, $340 million in inflated asset valuations, presented to investors as verified figures. A Series D round built on numbers that existed only because Derek had constructed them carefully enough that no one thought to look underneath. And underneath was where everything fell apart. Julian looked at me. "You understand that once we walk in," he said, "there is no version of tonight where things go back to the way they were." "I know," I said. "For Derek or for you," he added quietly. I looked at the entrance of the St. Regis. Through the tall glass doors, I could see the warm light of the lobby, flowers everywhere, guests moving in slow, elegant clusters. Somewhere inside that building was a 7-year-old girl in a flower girl dress with a ribbon in her hair, holding a small basket, waiting for a ceremony to begin. Somewhere inside was the man who had used her as a prop and the woman who had helped him do it. I picked up my bag from the floor of the car. Then Julian said, "Before we go in, there is one last thing you need to know. Something I did not tell you yesterday because I was not sure how to say it." He reached into the folder on the back seat and handed me a single page. I read it once. Then I looked up at him and said, "Lily is listed as a named beneficiary in Derek's trust restructuring. If this IPO closes, he controls her inheritance until she turns 30. He was never keeping her because he wanted to be her father. He was keeping her because she was worth $67 million to him on paper. And I had been one signature away from never knowing." We parked on 55th Street at 6:47 p.m. The St. Regis rose above us in pale stone and gold light, the kind of building that made everything around it look temporary. Doormen in white gloves, a red carpet running from the entrance to the curb. Black cars pulling up one after another, releasing people in evening gowns and dark suits who moved like they had always belonged in places like this. Julian turned off the engine. Neither of us spoke for a moment. He had the USB drive in his inside coat pocket. I had a copy on mine. We had spent the previous 48 hours verifying every document a final time. Julian with his contact at the SEC, me with a forensic accountant Julian trusted, who had reviewed the metadata files and confirmed in writing what they proved, $340 million in inflated asset valuations, presented to investors as verified figures. A Series D round built on numbers that existed only because Derek had constructed them carefully enough that no one thought to look underneath. And underneath was where everything fell apart. Julian looked at me. "You understand that once we walk in," he said, "there is no version of tonight where things go back to the way they were." "I know," I said. "For Derek or for you," he added quietly. I looked at the entrance of the St. Regis. Through the tall glass doors, I could see the warm light of the lobby, flowers everywhere, guests moving in slow, elegant clusters. Somewhere inside that building was a 7-year-old girl in a flower girl dress with a ribbon in her hair, holding a small basket, waiting for a ceremony to begin. Somewhere inside was the man who had used her as a prop and the woman who had helped him do it. I picked up my bag from the floor of the car. Then Julian said, "Before we go in, there is one last thing you need to know. Something I did not tell you yesterday because I was not sure how to say it." He reached into the folder on the back seat and handed me a single page. I read it once. Then I looked up at him and said, "Lily is listed as a named beneficiary in Derek's trust restructuring. If this IPO closes, he controls her inheritance until she turns 30. He was never keeping her because he wanted to be her father. He was keeping her because she was worth $67 million to him on paper, and I had been one signature away from never knowing. I walked in at 7:14 p.m., navy dress, low heels, nothing that said I was there to make a scene. everything that said I had every right to be in the room. Julian had entered through a side door 2 minutes ahead of me. We had one window, 30 minutes before the processional began. 30 minutes before Derek stood at that altar and made everything he had built look permanent. The St. Regis was exactly what you would expect. Champagne on silver trays, white flowers banked along every surface, the low, warm sound of a string quartet drifting from the ballroom. Guests in black tie moving in easy clusters, the kind of unhurried ease that comes from a lifetime of arriving at places like this. No one looked at me twice. I found the lead investor near the window. Mr. Nakamura. 60, silver-haired, with the careful eyes of a man who had spent his career reading rooms. He was mid-conversation with 2 colleagues when I approached. I waited for a pause. Then I set the USB drive on the table beside his champagne glass and said quietly, without drama, "Before you sign anything tonight, you should see what is on this." 7 words. Mr. Nakamura looked at the drive, then at me. Well, his expression did not change, but something shifted behind his eyes. The particular alertness of a man who has just felt the ground move beneath him. He picked up the drive. I stepped back. Across the room through the open ballroom doors, I could see Lily. White flower girl dress, small basket held in both hands. She was looking out at the crowd of strangers with those careful, quiet eyes I had been missing for 8 months. Then she saw me. She did not smile right away. She went very still, the way a child goes still when something they have been holding onto for a long time finally stops feeling impossible. Then she took one small step toward me, just one. A bridesmaid touched her shoulder and redirected her. But I had seen it. She had seen me. And that one step told me everything I needed to finish what I had come here to do. It did not happen all at once. That is the thing about watching someone lose everything. It does not look like a crash. It looks like a series of very small moments where the room slowly stops believing in them. It started with Mr. Nakamura. He stepped away from the cocktail reception at 7:31 p.m., USB drive in hand, and spoke quietly to the 2 colleagues beside him. I watched from across the lobby as all 3 moved toward a private room near the east corridor. The door closed behind them. 7 minutes later, one of the colleagues came back out and made a phone call in the hallway. His face was completely still in the way that faces go still when something expensive has just gone wrong. Derek was inside the ballroom when his phone buzzed. Julian was near enough to watch it happen. Derek checked the screen once, frowned slightly, unchecked it again. Then he said something brief to the man beside him and walked out a side door. Not rushing. Derek never rushed, but his jaw had the particular set of a man whose carefully constructed evening had just developed a crack he had not planned for. He did not come back for 11 minutes. When he returned, his face was composed, but his color was wrong. Too pale under the ballroom lights, the kind of pale that no amount of composure can fix. He found his attorney near the bar and bent close to say something. The attorney's expression did not move at all, which meant it was serious. Within 20 minutes, the 3 investors had quietly gathered their things and requested their cars. No announcements, no accusations across a crowded room. Just 3 men in dark suits walking through the lobby of the St. Regis toward the exit. I'm taking $800 million in committed capital with them on a drive the size of a thumbnail. The wedding ceremony never began. Derek stood at the front of that empty ballroom for a long moment after the last investor left. Alone in his Brioni suit, surrounded by white flowers and the sound of a string quartet that no longer had a reason to play. And for the first time in all the years I had known him, He looked exactly like what he was, a man who had finally run out of room to maneuver. I found Vivian in the bridal suite on the 4th floor. She was still in her wedding dress when I knocked. Ivory silk, hand-stitched beading along the neckline. The kind of dress that takes 6 months to make and 3 minutes to ruin. Her hair was still pinned up. Her bouquet was on the vanity beside an untouched glass of champagne that had gone flat. She had heard about the investors. Of course she had. In a room that size, news like that moved faster than the people trying to contain it. She looked at me when I came in, and she did not look surprised. That told me everything. "Serena," she said. "Just my name. No explanation, no apology. Just my name," said in the voice of a woman who had been waiting for this moment longer than I had. "I did not come here to fight," I told her. "I came because you deserve to know what he did to you too." She went very still. I sat down across from her and I told her about the trust restructuring. About the $67 million tied to Lily's name. About the way Derek had structured the entire plan. Not just to silence me, not just to build his investor image, but to consolidate control over every asset in his orbit before the IPO closed. Vivian had been part of that plan. Her debt erased, her future secured, her loyalty purchased. But she had never been a partner. She had been a utility. The same way Lily was a utility. The same way I had been, once. I watched her face as I spoke. I watched the moment she understood. She did not cry. Vivian had never been a crier. She just sat very straight in that ivory dress in the quiet of the bridal suite and stared at the flat champagne and said nothing for a long time. Then she looked up at me and said, "What do you need from me?" I told her. And the way she nodded, slowly, without hesitation, like a woman who had just decided that the only thing she had left worth protecting was the truth, told me that the last piece of everything we needed had just fallen into place. The hearing was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in January, 14 days after the St. Regis. 14 days after Mr. Nakamura's team filed a formal complaint with the SEC. 14 days after Julian's article went live on the Atlantic's website at 6 a.m. and had 400,000 readers by noon. Derek's attorney had requested a postponement. The judge denied it. I sat at the plaintiff's table in a gray wool coat, with my hands folded in front of me, and I did not look at Derek across the aisle. Julian had told me the night before, "Let the record speak. You do not need to perform anything today. Just be present and let the record speak." So I did. Vivian's written testimony was entered into evidence first. 11 pages. She had written it herself, longhand, and her attorney had read every word before filing it. It detailed the wire transfer, the recordings, the school incident report she had arranged, the bank deposits, all of it, in her own words, with dates and amounts and the specific instructions Derek had given her each step of the way. The judge read it without expression. Then the clerk called Lily. She came in through the side door with a family court advocate beside her, a small woman in a blue cardigan who held Lily's hand and walked her to the chair beside the judge's bench. Lily was wearing her navy corduroy dress, the one I had bought her 2 Christmases ago, before everything. She still fit in it. The judge leaned forward slightly and asked her in a gentle voice one simple question. He asked her where she wanted to live. Lily looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked up, not at Derek, not at the judge, directly at me, across that whole quiet room. And she said, "I want to go home with my mom." 8 words. The judge wrote something on his notepad. Derek's attorney started to rise from his chair. The judge raised one hand without looking up, a single small gesture, and the attorney sat back down. And in that moment of complete silence, 8 months of careful, deliberate, methodical destruction came to an end in the same building where it had all begun. We got home on a Thursday evening, not the Upper West Side, not the life we had before. Home meant the apartment on 34th Avenue, the nail holes in the walls finally filled, the radiator still clicking, the brick wall still outside the window. I had stopped minding it. Lily walked in ahead of me, dragging her bag, and looked around with the serious expression she wore when she was taking something in. Then she said, "It's cozy." I laughed. The first real laugh in longer than I could measure. The kind that comes from somewhere deep and arrives without warning. I said, "Yeah, it is." She slept in my bed that first night, small feet on the mattress, her breathing going slow and even long before mine did. I lay in the dark and felt something I had almost forgotten the shape of. Ordinary. Everything felt ordinary. And ordinary was the most extraordinary thing in the world. Julian came Saturday morning. He brought groceries, eggs, bread, milk, a tin of hot cocoa because Lily had mentioned it once in passing, and he had remembered. That was the kind of man he was. He remembered the small things. The three of us made breakfast in that tiny kitchen. Lily stood on a step stool and stirred the cocoa too fast, and spilled some and apologized very seriously. Julian told her that spilling was a sign of enthusiasm. She laughed. We sat on the floor of the living room because the table was too small for three. Lily between us, cocoa in hand, a cartoon playing on my laptop propped against the wall. Julian looked at me over the top of Lily's head. Just looked. No words needed. Later, when Lily had fallen asleep against my shoulder, he reached into his coat pocket and set something small on the floor between us. A ring. Simple. No performance. He said, "I am not in a hurry, but I wanted you to know where I stand." I looked at it for a long moment. Then I picked it up. And in that small apartment in Astoria, with the radiator clicking and the cartoon still playing, and my daughter warm against my side, I said yes to the first thing in years that asked nothing of me except to be exactly who I already was. And that's where Serena's story ends, my wonderful friends. But honestly, if you are still here with me right now, all the way to this moment, then I think something in this story touched you in a way that goes a little deeper than just entertainment. Maybe it was Lily pressing her hand against the glass. Maybe it was that small apartment in Astoria that felt more like home than any penthouse ever could. Or maybe it was just the quiet truth that the people who try hardest to break you sometimes end up being the very reason you discover how strong you actually are. Mere Marcus Aurelius wrote something I keep coming back to. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Serena did not win because she had money, or connections, or a perfect plan. She won because she refused to let what was done to her become the final word on who she was. She stayed present. She stayed honest. She kept going, even on the nights she had nothing left except one more morning. And here is what I want you to take with you today. Betrayal does not define you. The ground falling out beneath your feet does not define you. What defines you is the quiet decision you make, sometimes alone, sometimes in a cold apartment at 2 a.m, to keep building something real anyway. If this story gave you something today, a little fire, a little comfort, a little reminder that you are not alone in whatever you are carrying, would you do me one small favor? Hit that like button. Share this with someone who might need to hear it right now, and subscribe so you never miss what comes next. We tell stories like this because they matter. Because you matter. and I will see you in the next one. This story, including all characters, names, events, locations, and dialogue, is entirely fictional and created for entertainment and storytelling purposes only. Serena Caldwell, Derek Ashton, Vivian Rhodes, Julian Mercer, and all other characters in this narrative do not represent any real person, living or deceased. Any resemblance to actual individuals, companies, legal cases, or events is purely coincidental and unintentional. This content was carefully written, developed, and manually reviewed by our creative team with the sole purpose of delivering meaningful drama, emotional storytelling, and real-life lessons through the art of fiction. All legal, financial, and courtroom scenarios depicted are dramatized for narrative effect and should not be interpreted as factual accounts or professional advice of any kind. The themes explored in this story, including betrayal, custody disputes, financial fraud, and personal healing, are presented through a fictional lens to inspire reflection, empathy, and resilience in our audience. We believe in honest, transparent storytelling. This is a work of original creative fiction. Nothing more, nothing less. Thank you for watching with an open heart.